The silent zone. What if I told you that a US military missile went rogue in 1970, crashed in the Mexican desert, and when recovery teams arrived, they discovered something that broke the laws of physics? This is just the first of 10 places where sound itself goes insane. The Mapimí Silent Zone stretches across 30 miles of seemingly ordinary scrubland in Mexico's Chihuahuan desert, but there's nothing ordinary about what happens to sound and electromagnetic signals within its borders. This acoustic dead zone was discovered purely by accident when a United States military test missile, launched from Green River, Utah, veered dramatically off course. Instead of landing at its intended target in White Sands, New Mexico, the missile somehow found its way to this remote corner of Mexico, as if drawn by some invisible force. When recovery teams arrived to retrieve the wreckage, they discovered something that should have been impossible. Their radios went silent. Compasses spun wildly. Communication with the outside world simply ceased to exist. The recovery operation that should have taken hours stretched into days as teams found themselves operating in a technological void that defied all logic. Local residents had known about the zone's peculiar properties for generations. They spoke of cars that would suddenly stall for no mechanical reason, their engines refusing to restart until pushed beyond invisible boundaries. Tourists reported losing their voices entirely, their words seeming to dissolve in the desert air before reaching their companions standing just feet away. Scientists have documented the zone's ability to block radio transmissions across multiple frequencies, creating a communication blackout that has no scientific explanation. The Mexican government has established a research station at the heart of the anomaly, but their instruments consistently fail to explain why this particular patch of desert swallows sound and electromagnetic radiation like a hungry void. But here's what should terrify you. This is just the beginning. Every location we're about to explore shares one disturbing pattern that no one wants to talk about. The room that drives you mad. Microsoft built a room so quiet that it drives people insane in under an hour. That sounds like science fiction, until you realize they had to stop experiments because volunteers started hallucinating. Hidden deep within Microsoft's headquarters in Redmond, Washington, this acoustic laboratory holds the Guinness World Record as the quietest place on Earth. At negative 20.6 decibels, it's quieter than human breathing, quieter than a beating heart, quieter than the sound of your own thoughts. This chamber exists in a realm of silence that shouldn't be possible on our noisy planet. The moment you step inside, your brain begins its descent into madness. Within minutes, visitors report hearing sounds that shouldn't exist in perfect silence. Your own blood becomes a rushing river in your ears. Your heartbeat transforms into thunderous drumming that seems to echo from every direction. The simple act of swallowing becomes a grotesque symphony of internal plumbing that you never knew existed. But the real psychological breakdown begins around the 15-minute mark. Your brain, desperate for auditory input, starts manufacturing sounds from nothing. Visitors report hearing voices in the distance, footsteps that aren't there, and music from instruments that exist only in their minds. Some experience vertigo so severe they can't stand upright. Others develop claustrophobia, feeling as though the walls are closing in despite the space remaining unchanged. The chamber's walls absorb 99.99% of all sound. Microsoft engineers use this acoustic void to test audio equipment, but for human visitors, the experience becomes a journey into sensory deprivation that reveals just how much we depend on the constant background noise of existence. What's disturbing is that this isn't just about silence anymore. These dead zones are teaching us that human consciousness itself might be more fragile than we ever imagined. The stones that scream. Death Valley contains massive boulders that move by themselves while making sounds that shouldn't exist. Scientists solved how they move, but the phantom screams they emit remain a complete mystery. For over 8 decades, visitors to Racetrack Playa have discovered massive boulders, some weighing hundreds of pounds, that have somehow carved perfectly straight trails across the flat desert surface. The stones sit at the end of these mysterious furrows like period marks at the end of sentences written in an alien language. But it's not the movement that defies explanation, it's the phantom symphony that accompanies it. Witnesses consistently report hearing deep grinding sounds, like massive gears turning beneath the earth, echoing across the playa when no stones are visibly moving. Park rangers have documented accounts of tourists hearing prolonged scraping noises in broad daylight, followed by the discovery of fresh stone trails that weren't there hours before. The sounds seem to come from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the surrounding mountains in impossible ways. In 2014, scientists finally solved the movement mystery. Ultra-thin sheets of ice create a hydroplane effect that allows gentle winds to push the massive stones across the slick surface. The movement happens so slowly, it's nearly imperceptible to human eyes. But this explanation only deepens the acoustic puzzle. If the stones move at a glacial pace barely detectable to observers, why do witnesses hear such dramatic grinding and scraping sounds? Desert acoustics researchers suggest the extreme temperature variations create sound mirages, acoustic phenomena where sounds become trapped in thermal layers and travel impossible distances before reaching human ears. The grinding sounds might be real, but time-shifted, bouncing endlessly between the desert floor and atmospheric layers, like a geological recording played on an endless loop. Notice the pattern emerging? These aren't random anomalies. Something is fundamentally wrong with how sound behaves in specific locations around our planet. The global hum. Around the world, thousands of people are slowly going insane from a humming sound that doesn't exist. What makes this truly terrifying is that it's spreading to new locations every year. It started in Taos, New Mexico, where residents began reporting a persistent, maddening drone in the early 1990s. They described it as the sound of a diesel engine idling in the distance, a refrigerator compressor that never cycles off, or the rumble of heavy machinery that operates 24 hours a day. The problem was that no such source existed anywhere in the area. The phenomenon quickly earned the name the Taos hum, but it wasn't confined to one small desert town. Similar reports began surfacing worldwide: Bristol, England; Largs, Scotland. Soon, documented cases emerged from Australia, Canada, and dozens of locations across the United States. Each community described the same maddening low-frequency drone that seemed to have no external source. What makes the global hum particularly disturbing is its selectivity. Only about 2% of the population can hear it, but for those who do, the experience becomes a living nightmare. Sufferers report severe insomnia, unable to escape the constant droning even with earplugs or white noise machines. Many develop depression and anxiety disorders. Families have been torn apart when spouses and children can't hear what's driving their loved one to distraction. Scientists have conducted extensive investigations, deploying sensitive acoustic equipment and electromagnetic sensors in affected areas. The results are consistently baffling. Their instruments detect nothing unusual. No low-frequency sounds, no electromagnetic anomalies, no mechanical sources that could account for the reports. The most unsettling aspect isn't the sound itself, but the isolation it creates. Sufferers often report feeling gaslit by their own reality, questioning their sanity, while the phantom hum continues its relentless assault on their peace of mind. But here's what the authorities don't want you to know. New hum locations are being reported every single year, and the affected population is growing. The cathedral's glitch. St. Paul's Cathedral contains acoustic dead zones where screams vanish and whispers become deafening roars. Christopher Wren's architectural masterpiece harbors glitches that seem to mock the very laws of physics. The Whispering Gallery, perched 100 feet above the cathedral floor, is renowned for its perfect acoustic design. A whisper spoken against one section of the circular wall travels clearly around the entire dome, allowing conversations across the 34-foot diameter space. Tour guides demonstrate this marvel daily, delighting visitors with the seemingly magical transmission of hushed words across impossible distances. But within this acoustic perfection lie zones of absolute chaos that Wren never intended, and modern science struggles to explain. Certain spots along the gallery's circumference create what acoustics experts call dead zones, areas where even shouted words simply disappear, swallowed by an invisible acoustic void. Visitors standing just inches apart in these locations cannot hear each other speak, no matter how loudly they try to communicate. Historical records from the cathedral's archives reveal even stranger phenomena. Priests conducting services in the cathedral's lower levels have reported hearing confessions whispered in the gallery above with crystal clarity, as if the penitents were speaking directly into their ears. These accounts span centuries, long before modern acoustic equipment could measure or explain such transmission anomalies. More disturbing are the reports of acoustic amplification zones where normal conversation becomes overwhelmingly loud. Visitors have described stepping into invisible pockets where their own whispers return as deafening echoes, forcing them to flee to quieter sections of the gallery. Some report hearing multiple conversations simultaneously, as if sound from different time periods becomes layered and compressed into a cacophonous symphony. Modern acoustic mapping, using laser interferometry, has revealed sound transmission voids that shouldn't exist within the dome's geometry. These dead zones appear as acoustic shadows where sound waves simply cease to propagate. The pattern is becoming undeniable. These aren't isolated incidents, they're symptoms of something larger happening to sound itself. The sound from the abyss. In 1997, underwater microphones detected a sound so massive it could only come from a creature larger than any whale that ever lived. The ocean had just spoken in a voice that wasn't supposed to exist. The sound originated from coordinates deep in the South Pacific, roughly 1,500 miles west of Chile's coast. NOAA's network of underwater listening posts picked up an ultra-low frequency sound unlike anything in their extensive acoustic databases. The hydrophones registered a rapid frequency rise that lasted just over 1 minute, but the implications of that brief transmission sent shockwaves through the marine biology community. To understand the scale of the bloop, consider that blue whale songs, the loudest sounds produced by any living creature, can be detected across hundreds of miles of ocean. The bloop was detected across more than 3,000 miles. The source, whatever it was, would have needed to be several times larger than the biggest blue whale ever recorded to produce such massive acoustic output. Marine biologists immediately began speculating about unknown deep-sea creatures. The sound's profile suggested biological origins. It had the characteristic frequency sweep of animal communication, not the mechanical signatures of geological events or human technology. But the size requirements for any creature capable of producing the bloop pushed the boundaries of biological possibility. NOAA eventually attributed the bloop to a massive iceberg calving event near Antarctica, where grinding ice creates powerful low-frequency sounds that can travel vast distances through ocean channels. The explanation satisfied official scientific inquiry, but it couldn't fully account for the sound's distinctly biological characteristics that had initially captivated researchers. The bloop wasn't alone in the ocean's catalogue of unexplained sounds. NOAA's hydrophones have also recorded upsweep, a persistent sound source in the Pacific that has been active for decades, slow down, and Julia transmissions that defied classification. The ocean keeps its acoustic secrets well, but what if these aren't natural phenomena? What if something is systematically disrupting sound across our entire planet? The canyon that sings. Antelope Canyon contains spots where sound waves become visible, light beams that dance across the walls. Visitors are witnessing something that should be physically impossible. The canyon's serpentine walls, sculpted by centuries of flash floods, create one of nature's most sophisticated acoustic chambers. The narrow passage, sometimes only 3 feet wide but reaching heights of over 100 feet, forms a natural sound tunnel where acoustic waves behave in ways that defy conventional physics. Tour guides have documented instances where certain sounds within the canyon trigger cascades of light beams that dance across the undulating walls. Photographers and tourists consistently report witnessing sound waves as visible phenomena. When groups call out or clap their hands, witnesses describe seeing ripples of light pulse along the canyon walls in sync with the acoustic reverberations. These aren't the famous sunbeams that filter down from the narrow opening above. These are lateral waves of illumination that appear to originate from sound itself. The Navajo, who consider Antelope Canyon sacred, have legends that speak of spirits communicating through the stone walls using voices made of light. Tribal elders describe how ancestors could send messages through the canyon by speaking in tones that would paint themselves across the rock faces, creating a visual language that transcended normal sound. Scientists studying the phenomenon have documented acoustic optical interference patterns within the canyon's confined geometry. The sandstone walls, rich in quartz crystals, may create piezoelectric effects where mechanical vibrations from sound waves generate minute electrical charges. These charges could theoretically interact with the canyon's unique light-scattering properties, creating visible manifestations of acoustic energy. The effect is most pronounced in areas where the canyon walls create perfect acoustic reflection points. Sound waves bouncing between the narrow walls appear to modulate the scattered light particles suspended in the canyon air, creating brief but visible patterns that mirror the acoustic reverberations. But here's what's truly disturbing. If sound can become light, what other fundamental laws of physics are breaking down in these locations? The waterfall that swallows sound. Minnesota contains a waterfall where half of a river disappears, along with every sound it should make. Scientists can't explain where the water goes, but locals report something even stranger: voices being pulled into the void. Located deep within Judge C.R. Magny State Park, the Brule River reaches a dramatic rocky outcrop and inexplicably divides. The eastern flow plunges 50 feet into a churning pool below, roaring with the expected fury of thousands of gallons per minute crashing against stone. But the western branch tells a different story entirely. It pours into a smooth-walled pothole and disappears into the earth with an acoustic signature that defies all logic: complete silence. Standing at the waterfall's edge, visitors experience an auditory impossibility. They can hear the thunderous eastern cascade from hundreds of yards away, but the western flow, carrying an equal volume of water, makes no sound whatsoever as it vanishes into the mysterious kettle. It's as if the hole doesn't just swallow water, but consumes the very sound waves the falling liquid should create. Hydrologists have attempted to solve the mystery for decades. They've poured fluorescent dyes into the western flow, expecting the colored water to emerge somewhere downstream in Lake Superior. The dyes never surfaced. They've dropped ping-pong balls, expecting them to pop up in the lake or river system below. The balls vanished without a trace. GPS-equipped devices thrown into the kettle simply disappear from all tracking systems. Local accounts describe an even stranger phenomenon. Visitors report that voices and sounds near the western pothole seem to get pulled toward the opening. Conversations become muffled, shouts lose their resonance, and even whispers seem to bend toward the hole, as if the earth itself is listening. Recent geological surveys suggest the water might flow through underground lava tubes, but this explanation doesn't account for the complete acoustic void created by the disappearing water. The pattern is becoming clear. These aren't just curiosities. Something is systematically creating acoustic voids across our planet. The battlefield where cannons went silent. During the Battle of Gettysburg, soldiers just miles away couldn't hear cannon fire that should have been deafening. The atmosphere itself had created pockets of perfect silence in the middle of America's bloodiest conflict. On July 1st through 3rd, 1863, over 160,000 men clashed across the Pennsylvania countryside in a battle that would determine the fate of a nation. Artillery batteries unleashed thousands of cannon rounds in bombardments so intense they shook buildings 30 miles away. Yet Confederate and Union forces positioned just a few miles from the heaviest fighting reported an eerie, inexplicable silence where they should have heard the thunder of war. The phenomenon, known as acoustic shadow, occurs when atmospheric conditions create invisible barriers that block sound transmission. During the sweltering July heat at Gettysburg, temperature inversions formed distinct layers in the atmosphere, creating acoustic boundaries that bent sound waves away from certain areas, leaving soldiers in zones of surreal quiet. General Robert E. Lee's forces, positioned south of the main battle, reported being unable to hear the massive artillery duel on Cemetery Ridge, despite being within clear visual range of the smoke and flashes. Union reinforcements marching toward the battle describe the unsettling experience of seeing the visual chaos of combat, muzzle flashes, smoke clouds, and troops in motion, while hearing nothing but the sound of their own footsteps and equipment. The acoustic shadows weren't limited to Gettysburg. Similar phenomena plagued battles throughout the Civil War. Confederate General Joseph Johnston couldn't hear fighting that was occurring less than 2 miles from his position. Union generals at Antietam reported being unable to coordinate attacks because they couldn't determine where the heaviest fighting was occurring based on sound alone. These weren't random weather events. The acoustic shadows appeared consistently in specific geographic locations, as if certain areas of our planet are naturally predisposed to swallowing sound. But what if these battlefield silences weren't natural at all? What if they were early manifestations of something that's been growing stronger? The desert that screams. The singing sands of the world's deserts emit musical tones, but some dunes scream in frequencies that violate the laws of physics. What's truly terrifying is that these impossible sounds are getting louder. The phenomenon begins innocently enough. In over 30 locations worldwide, from Morocco's Sahara to China's Gobi Desert, certain sand dunes produce musical tones when disturbed. Step on the slope of these singing sands, and they respond with deep, resonant hums that can last for several minutes. Marco Polo documented these singing mountains during his travels along the Silk Road, describing sounds like all kinds of musical instruments emanating from the desert floor. Scientists have identified the basic mechanism. When dry sand grains of specific sizes avalanche down steep dune faces, they create synchronized vibrations that generate sound waves. The grains must be perfectly round, between 1/10 and 0.5 millimeter in diameter, and contain less than 1% moisture. Under these precise conditions, the cascading sand produces tones in the 60 to 105 Hz range. But some dunes violate these rules entirely. Researchers have recorded booming sands that produce frequencies as low as 17 Hz, well below the threshold of human hearing. These infrasonic emissions require sand avalanches moving at impossible speeds or involving grain sizes that don't exist in nature. The sounds penetrate not just the air, but the ground itself, creating seismic vibrations that sensitive equipment can detect from hundreds of miles away. Local legends speak of desert jinn communicating through the sand, their voices carrying across the dunes on supernatural frequencies. Bedouin guides in the Sahara describe certain areas where the sand screams rather than sings, producing haunting wails that seem to emerge from deep within the earth rather than from surface avalanches. Modern recording equipment has captured these impossible sounds, desert music that plays in keys that shouldn't exist, performed by orchestras of sand grains following acoustic rules that no earthly physics can fully explain. Here's what the authorities don't want you to know. These acoustic anomalies aren't random curiosities. They're spreading. Every year, new dead zones appear. The silent areas are expanding. The impossible sounds are getting stronger. And no one knows why our planet's acoustic laws are systematically breaking down, or what happens when they collapse completely.